I'm the director of the production, and I'd love it now, friends, if we could go around and just introduce yourselves, say a little bit about which character you are playing, and then I've got a bunch of questions that you've asked from social media that I'm going to address and throw to the cast as well. Danny, let's start off with you.
Okay, my name's Danny Ball. I'm playing Don Pedro, who is the Prince of Aragon and the first Watchman.
Hi everyone, my name's Paul Reichstein. I'm playing Don John the Bastard and also one of the Watchmen.
Hi friends, I'm Duncan Ragg. I'm playing Benedict. I'm just looking at the camera now. I'm playing Benedict, who's just a guy who's in love or not in love with Beatrice.
As he discovers. I'm Mandy Bishop, hello, and I'm playing Balthazar, who is a messenger, a combination of a couple of characters in Act 1, a messenger and the musician of the court or the family house that we're visiting. And in Act 2, I play Dogberry, who is a male constable.
Hi, I'm Zinzi Okenyo, and I am playing Beatrice. That's it.
Hello, I'm Marissa Bennett. I am playing Margaret, who is the waiting woman to Hero, and I'm also playing Verges, who is Dogberry's second in charge.
Hi, I'm Will McDonald. I'm playing Claudio, who's one of Don Pedro's entourage, and then Hero's fiancé, and then Baraccio, one of Don John's henchmen.
Hi everyone, I'm Suzanne Pereira. I play the character Antonio, which in the original text is a man, but I'm playing her as a woman, and she is sister to Leonato, the governor of Messina, and aunt then to Beatrice and Hero. And I'm also playing Sexton, who is, I guess, like a court official. And I should mention that the character of the friar who exists in the original text, we've actually combined the friar and Antonio, and so I play, I guess, the spiritual guide of the town of Messina as well.
Hi, I'm David Whitney. I'm playing Leonato, who's the governor of Messina, which is where the action of the play takes place. He's brother to Antonia, and uncle to Beatrice, and father to Hero.
Thank you very much, everyone. Now, I should mention that, of course, we are also missing Viv Awasoga, who is playing Hero. She's not feeling particularly well tonight, and we wish her all the best. We'll see her soon. We'll see her tomorrow for opening night, but she's not here tonight. Now, I've got a couple of questions here. Why don't we start off with one from Josie from Instagram. Hi, Josie. Josie says, do you guys change the script? And if so, why? Good question, Josie. Now, look, we don't change the words in the script, but we do actually edit the script. Now, this is no surprise. Everyone edits Shakespeare. Our play is a tight 2 hours 20, including interval. A nice, quick, fresh breath of fresh air in the theatre. Now, it's particularly an issue with Shakespeare's comedies because some of the jokes perhaps don't make sense anymore, not so funny as they used to be perhaps. And so we have trimmed some of those, we've trimmed some of the lines, and we've edited and conflated some of the characters. So yes, there have been edits made. Now it's an interesting point when you do a Shakespearean comedy, and this is a comedy, but also it has some extraordinarily tragic elements in it as well, which we'll talk about in a minute. But let me ask you, Duncan Ragg, playing Benedict, how do you connect to the comedy that is written in a script 400 years ago? How do you connect to that?
Is this for Josie?
Yeah.
Still? Hello. How do you connect to the comedy? Two ways. One, you look at the text, and the text gives you a lot of information about the character, but also the lines are funny. And the lines are funny, were funny then and are funny now for most of them. The other part of it is you get in a room with a bunch of people and you find out what gives you joy and how you spark off different characters. Because when you cast, each person, each actor is bringing a different energy to that particular character. and you find that you have different relationships with each character. So you start to play games and you start to make bold choices, and some of those choices get discarded along the way, and some get tested out in an audience in the room with James and with a bunch of other actors who sit around laughing at you or shaking their heads or politely going, and then you come in front of an audience and you do a couple of previews and you find out what's funny, and you do as many gags as you can, and they slowly get cut and cut and cut and cut until you have what you think is a kernel of something that's funny. And then you tour around Australia and you get to show to all of these different audiences. And audiences with their laughs let you in to know how they're feeling about the play, with their breaths, if they hold their breath, or you can feel when they get bored, and so you tighten or you add as you go. And that's the best part about this tour, really. You go to so many different places with so many different audiences. You do 11 o'clock matinees for schools, or you do late night shows for an audience of 600, and you find out what's universally funny, and you read the audience each night. So it's a mix of both what Shakespeare's brought to it, but what you as an actor have to bring to it with these other excellent actors in the room.
Yeah, that's great. I love Duncan's characterization of my directing as you cut and you cut and you cut. I think that's perhaps quite apt. But Marissa, let me ask you then, as playing Verges, who's a comic character, but involved in a lot of the physical comedy of the piece. How do you find that in the rehearsal room, especially working in tandem with Mandy Bishop as Dogberry? How did you find the comedy of that particular character?
By accident a lot of the time.
Yeah, sure.
I guess really I came in with some strong physical choices, I would say, and I just kind of threw them out there and to see if they worked or if they didn't work. And those that worked I kind of stuck with and pushed a little bit further. And I was very lucky to be working with Mandy, who is an extraordinary comic actress. And we also, I mean, Verges doesn't have a lot to say, so a lot of his comedy is in his physicality and also his reaction to the other characters around him. So Mandy and I had conversations about the relationship that Verges and Dogberry might have, and that informed a lot about how we interact on stage. And like Duncan was saying, once you get out on the road, you often find, oh, here's a bit that audiences love. I might just push that a little bit further without going too far. But yeah, and so an audience really, for me as an actor, particularly doing a role where I am free not to speak for a lot of the time, the audience gives me a great gift of being able to shift and change and expand my physical choices. Yeah.
Thanks, Marissa. Great. Now, here's a question we're getting quite a lot as we go around the country. It's why much ado about nothing? Why now? Zinzi, perhaps you'd like to address that question. Why do much ado in 2019?
Well, I think that with any play, any work that you do, it's really important to ask why. And I think it's even more important, especially with classics and with Shakespeare, to really delve in and really scrutinize, in a sense, why we're going to do it now in 2019. And when James and I first spoke before we started rehearsals, I really loved James's framework for the show. And that framework was really making sure that we really looked at how the men behaved in this play. I think it's really interesting because I think even maybe 5 years ago to do this play, there wouldn't have been such an urgency, I think, from the audience, but also in the world to really make sure that we're not allowing the men to get away with the behaviour that they have in this play, but that also, I mean, the play has really revealed itself to be incredibly relevant. I knew that it was, but I think doing it and then talking to audiences, even with the month or so of shows that we've already done, I can really see that it is so important to make sure that the women are treated well in this play, especially Hero. I mean, I actually think the play is about Hero and what happens to her, but also who she is and making sure she has a voice within the structure of the show. And I think our production really endeavours to do that. But I think that's what's beautiful about art, that you do have the ability to, and I think the responsibility to actually reflect what's happening at the time and also look at history. And that's kind of the beauty of being an actor, is being able to be part of that process.
That's great. Suze, What do you reckon? Much ado in 2019. What have you found through the rehearsal process and doing the show for a month already? What have you found that is a nugget of relevance for you in this show?
For me, it's pretty easy actually. There's one moment in the play that crystallises the very reason to do Much Ado About Nothing in 2019, and it actually came as a gift from Jimmy, because we've allowed the character of Antonio to be played as a woman by a woman, and it's the moment when Antonio calls the boys out for their behaviour, and it's exactly what Zinzi was talking about, to ensure that we don't let them off the hook. And so I guess when Antonio is able to very clearly and very powerfully call the boys out for their behaviour, say exactly what she knows them to be, I have watched it and heard it resonate with audiences around the country so far. And in those moments, you can really hear a pin drop in the theatre, and I think the reason for that is because we see this behaviour maybe not in exactly the same way in our world, but we do see men and boys behaving in a way that we would like them not to, and we see them behaving in a way that they haven't thought deeply enough about, and oftentimes we don't get to call them out. And so for me, I've had lots of conversations with women particularly who have said, oh my goodness, when you say those words to those boys, it's like, yes. And I think that that's really important. And then I've had lots of conversations with men, and I know Jimmy mentioned as a father of 2 young boys, and I'm a mother of you know, a teenage boy. It becomes, for me, the absolute reason to do this play now. So yeah, I think it's become very important, and it's revealed itself to be much more important than I thought it, you know, perhaps otherwise was.
Yeah, thanks, Suze. Now, this play is touring to 27 different venues around Australia. Paulie, why tour Shakespeare all around the country, capital cities, country towns all over Australia? Why is it important, do you think?
Why is that important? I think it's important because it's a story we want to share with everyone. I think we can get quite city-centric, capital city-centric, because there's, you know, a subscriber base there, and we've always performed there. But my favourite places to tour are always the country towns or the regional centres, and it's not because the audiences are more raucous or we're getting more response, but I just think they're more interesting responses, and I get a sense that they're waiting for these things to come to them, and they don't want to have to go to the city. They have thriving arts communities in places like Bendigo and Warrnambool, and amazing theatres that we love to perform in. Also, the thing about this production is that it's a fully fledged production. It's not a two-hander or, you know, a one-man show, which I think is common practice, that those things visit regional centres or musicians. But this show is 10 actors. We have 5 technical crew who travel everywhere with us. So I think it's a bigger deal.
That's great.
Yeah.
Now, and of course, the same production that will be at the Sydney Opera House at the end of the year, of course, is the same production that goes to the other 26 venues all around the country. Right. Now, Mandy, here's another question from our website. Music in Shakespeare. Now, Shakespeare has written song lyrics in this play. He often does in his comedies. What is important about music in our production and in Shakespeare in general?
Thank you for the question. We have not only music, but we have dance as well. Some of us are better dancers than others. I'm not one of them. Music is often a respite for the brain to visit the heart if you are thinking about text and performing text. So Shakespeare is no fool. He has put music into lots of his comedies. We were just discussing this earlier. And some dramas have it, but not all dramas. And obviously you've seen music in many other plays following Shakespeare's writings. Music in our play is to alleviate, yes, the story from taking over the brain and then moving the emotions of the audience and the characters in the play more than just in an academic way. Shakespeare's lyrics can be set to any music. It's an interesting question because I'd like to know if any of his music was notated from earlier productions. Perhaps James can answer that after me. But I'll just tell him what he has to do, even though he's the director. So in our play, our characters play the music as well, which is a lovely thing for the actors to get to do. It's a celebration point. We also tease Benedict, the character, with our music. Our music is also used at a point of funeral, hero's funeral in the play. So it's used to elicit the depth of the message that we were just hearing about from Suze and Zinzi in terms of don't let the boys get away with the behaviour that they are trying to in the play. And James has very astutely added Sonnet 116 to the end of the play, and I will leave that message and why he chose that particular sonnet for us to sing at the end. But Andre Greenwell, our composer, has composed, I guess it would be a modern hymn or a modern anthem, and we all sing it after the play has finished its action. And I guess if you'd like to hear about the sonnet and the words and why.
Yeah, well, I'll leave the interpretation of that to our audience to see what they think about that ending. But for now, let me throw to Danny across here with another question via Facebook from Jen. What are you excited about touring Much Ado About Nothing around Australia, and considering that you know this is a long tour for you as an actor. It's long. You're 4 or 5 months on the road. How do you prepare for a tour like this? And how do you look after yourself on a tour like this? Yeah.
Rightio. So how do we prepare for a tour like this? It's a good question. I think the main thing for me is building a kind of foundation with your relationships and your life prior to going on the road. So being away from loved ones, partners, friends can be really, really challenging. And I think, you know, for example, me and my partner FaceTime every night before we go to bed, which kind of sounds cute and sweet. Say it out loud.
That's very sweet.
But you know, like things like that are really important because you're totally isolated from your normal life, and so things like that are really important. What was the second part of the question, Jimmy?
And how do you look after yourself on the road on a long tour like this?
Well, okay, so I did I was lucky enough to do the Players Tour for Bell Shakespeare last year, which is where we tour 3 different shows around the country going into primary schools and high schools. So that was my first experience touring, and most nights I would go to the pub and have Palmers and, you know, just enjoy that tour life, which is fun. But after 6 months, it can kind of take a bit of a toll. So I think... You're agreeing. So I think on this tour, in terms of looking after yourself, it's really important balancing, you know, your social activities, but also your mental health is really, really important, and how you kind of look after that on tour, and, you know, exercising and eating well are just really important, when you're touring.
Thank you.
Jimmy, can I just add to that? Yeah. One of the things that we are really lucky with in terms of working for Bell Shakespeare is that we have access to support while we're on the road, and I think that that's something that has been really important, even if you don't access it, just to know that it's there. And so we have a professional psychologist who is has been involved in the arts for a long time, so she knows what we're going through, and it's a wonderful mechanism to actually support a group of people who are on the road and away from their families and their lives that they're used to for, you know, 5 months. So I think that that's something that's actually really important to all of us, just to know that it's there, and really great. And the fact that our industry is understanding that that's what artists need in support of a tour like this has been really great.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Can I just add, though, that it's not all doom and gloom. There's lots of great things about touring, and seeing all these different places that we're going to, and seeing the beautiful things in towns, you know, the rivers or the ocean or the hills or the galleries, and meeting the people, the local people. So while there are certainly challenging aspects in terms of living your life back home, there are wonderful opportunities to be paid to be a tourist and to engage with Australians all around the country about Shakespeare, but just also about life in general. So there's lots of real positives in all these places. We're going right up north, Darwin, Cairns. We're going to Tassie, which is great. Victoria. So there's lots of real positives to be
Dave
had on a tour like this.
Dave mentioned meeting people after the show. That's one of the nicest things as well. Is that you get to the first show I ever saw, the first theatre show I ever saw was a Bell show that toured around, and I was blown away by the fact that theatre existed, but also that Shakespeare could be funny or interesting, and that the actors stuck around afterwards to talk to you, and suddenly you had some of the best actors in Australia who were just giving you their time over a cheese platter or whatever to talk to you, and that was mind-blowing for someone from the country that you could have that experience. So that's also the best part, is that we get to now take that mantle on and be like, yeah, if you're around after the show, come say hi. So it's great.
Yeah, for sure. A couple more questions before we wrap it up today. David, on this wonderful tour that we go on, every theatre is different. You sometimes have a thrust stage, sometimes a straight proscenium march. How do you change and adjust your playing style as you're going around the country? How is it different playing, say, in a proscenium march compared to, say, you would in an outdoor venue during the daylight with no lights? What's the difference in playing style there?
You have to be really on your toes in each of the different theatres that we're going to, because they vary in size a lot. And we were in Melbourne for a couple of weeks recently in the Fairfax Theatre, which is very intimate, and the audience is right there and very close to us. And then some other theatres that we play in, the audience can be further away and can be a long way back, or there can be a dress circle. So you obviously have to adapt vocally to be heard and to be appropriate vocally in each, not too loud but not too soft in each venue. And there's a certain rapport with the audience which is more immediate in some theatres than others, so you really have to listen to what our audience is giving us in each of the different venues. It's a great challenge, and we only generally, in some of the regional venues, we have a couple of hours in the afternoon to do a technical rehearsal where we go through all the lighting and the sound, but as actors we're judging the space and hearing what it sounds like, but then remembering that when there are 300 or 400 people in there, the sound will be quite different. So you're constantly on your toes trying to just give the best performance you possibly can in each and every venue. And in the ones where you get to sit there for a week, as we do here in Perth, or some of the other venues that we're going to, then you have the real luxury of actually settling into the venue and not having to pack up your costume and your makeup after the show and go home.
Yeah, great.
Can I add a tiny technical thing to that? Sometimes the theatre stages are slightly different to the ones that we've just been in, and so James, or our resident director, travelling director with us, tells us that we might actually have to stand in different places. The shapes of scenes can change in terms of where our bodies, it's called blocking, and where we stand on stage and where we angle so that all the audience can see us, because it's not always a square going out from the stage. It can be slightly rounded, as David was saying, and that's fascinating. Sometimes you have to rethink about the whole scene.
Sure. Okay, Paul, you have a thought about that?
And also the behind the set. That's the one that makes me take a breath for a moment, because say in Melbourne you've got this beautiful like catwalk runway where I just felt like it was just streamlined and I could be on a conveyor belt, and it was, but then in, where were we, Bendigo, it was a little more boxy, like there were shadows and dark corners, and I'm like, no, that's not my entrance, that's a wall. And that does take me, and I worry about the voice later. I'm like, okay, backstage I'm fine. You can never tell.
Thank you, Paul. One more question here. This is from Amy about the challenging aspects of this play in rehearsal. Let's ask you, Will, what were one of the two of the more challenging aspects for you in rehearsal for this production?
Well, certainly one of the challenging aspects for me in this production was the fact that, by virtue of the fact that I'm playing Claudio and Baraccio, there's times where, scenes with one of the characters will immediately follow a scene right after the previous one, particularly at the end of the party scene after Claudio and Hero get engaged. I have to leave the stage and I have literally a matter of seconds to completely change into a different costume. That's what a quick change is. It's when you have to really change your costume very fast and then get out on stage and play a completely new character. And sometimes it's, you know, it's not just me counting on me. There's other actors like Paul as Don John is just out there on the stage by himself. So if I'm having trouble putting my shoes on, then, you know, it's a bad look. So getting that down was, you know, particularly when we got to the venues and when we, you know, you're in the dark, you kind of can't see where you're going. That was a bit scary, you know, right before we opened in Melbourne. So that was definitely one of the challenging things in rehearsals. And then another thing, I guess, emotionally, certainly playing a character like Claudio, like you need to, at certain points, particularly at the beginning when you're sitting around a table and you're having your first read of the script, you know, everyone's just sitting there reading their lines. You know, you take yourself out of the character's perspective in the play and you view their actions objectively, and particularly with a character like him, you know, that wedding scene, he's so cruel, he's so awful, and then just how uncaring he is after that. You've got to make sure that when you're in rehearsals, and particularly then when you're on the road and you're doing it night after night, that you're leaving those emotions and you're leaving those places that you have to go to mentally at the theatre, and you're not taking them home, because that's when it starts to affect your personal relationships. That's when it starts to, particularly the worst times I've found is when it starts to affect you mentally. So you've got to be able to kind of compartmentalize it and put it in a little box and go, you know, okay, we leave him at the theatre and then we go be Will for the rest of the day. So that was, those were certainly two challenging things, but, you know, I think I got the hang of the quick changes.
Thank you, Will. Yes, de-rolling, very important part of an actor's toolkit, skill set. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much, everybody, and to the cast of Much Ado About Nothing. Friends, we will be here in Perth Wednesday to Saturday. Then we're off to Albany, Bunbury and Mandurah, and then off around the country, another 20-odd venues, and finishing at the Sydney Opera House in October and November. It has been a great pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for tuning. Do you still call it tuning in with the internet? I'll call it. Yes, thank you.
It is still called tuning in. So
thank you very much. Well, I'll take it from the young person. Thank you so much, and hope to see you in the theatre very soon.